Hey everybody, it's Sheri Traxler with ViREO Life, and today I'm taking a challenge from one of my readers. Whenever I posted the chicken recipe, which I'll link that below, he said, what can you do healthy with ground beef? Well, that's supposing that ground beef is not healthy. If you get grass-fed 90-10 ground beef, it is going to have less saturated fat, and it's also going to have some of the healthier fats in it because the beef is grass-fed. One of the recipes I'm making today is with grass-fed beef. The other recipe you can make with beef, but I'm going to be making it with ground turkey breast because within a week, even though ground beef is healthy in its place, I don't want to have several servings of ground beef in a week. That's going to push that saturated fat content pretty high. So the other recipe is with ground turkey breast. If you're only making the one recipe, go ahead and use the ground beef in it. The two recipes that I'm making, one is a favorite for the fall for me. Actually, they're both favorites for fall. One is a favorite for fall because as I keep longing for summer a little bit, mint is a very flavorful herb that I use still in my garden that's still growing, surviving the first frost. And it is in the Greek meatball recipe. There's a cup of it's a lot of mint. But that's okay because there's plenty of mint in the garden right now. There's a cup of mint in this, and it reminds me of summer because of the mint, but also the ground beef has that heartiness that I like in the fall. The other recipe for the fall, of course, is chili. This particular chili recipe has a lot of vegetables that I'll show you, as well as some spices that are a little different, make it a little bit different twist on the chili for us. Also, because the fat content of the chili I'm making with the ground turkey breast is going to be practically none. With a powerful plate, and I'll link the powerful plate video below, the powerful plate teaches us we need a little bit of fat at each meal. The meatballs, no problem. It's ground beef. It's got your fat in there. The ground turkey breast, though, that chili doesn't really have any, so I'll show you a creative way to add some healthy fat with your chili. We'll see you in a moment with the ingredients. Let's talk about the mint meatballs first. I know that it sounds weird, but it's actually a very good recipe. First, of course, is the beef, grass-fed beef, 90-10, like we've talked about. This is a recipe from Bon Appetit, and they taught me a new technique for making my onion for meatballs that I had not seen before. This is onion, a small onion that instead of processing in the food processor or finely chopping, is to use the large holes on a grater. That gets so much of the moisture out because you're then able to strain it off, squeeze it out with a cheesecloth, however, completely changes the amount of moisture that's going into those meatballs and changes the texture of the onion. And meatballs to me are not only about taste, they're also about texture. 2 eggs beaten. Mint, I'm using spearmint as well as peppermint out of the garden, chopping up about a cup's worth of that. Now, this is a technique that they talked about in the Bon Appetit recipe that I am changing because they call for 3 slices of stale bread. I just really don't have stale bread laying around the house all the time. So I take 3 regular slices and toast them. Then sprinkle a little bit of water over, take the bread crust off and sprinkle a little bit of water, and then just take my meat tenderizer masher until I get the consistency of the breadcrumbs for the meatballs that I want. If you're a food science person, please explain this to me and to everybody else. In the recipe, in the original recipe, they talked about taking the stale bread, sprinkling the water over it, and then being able to mash it up and crumble it. So you take the moisture out and then you put moisture back in to get the texture. If I just take 3 pieces of regular bread and try to do that, I can't get the same texture. But somehow if you take moisture out, put moisture in, it works. Somebody please explain that to me. Pepper. Now here's where I'm going to do massively different from the recipe. Not on the ingredients, but on how it is cooked. This recipe already has plenty of fat in it through the beef. Again, as we're looking at the powerful plate that I'll link below, You want some fat with each meal. So they talk about using a cup of oil to have these 24 meatballs into basically deep frying them in a pan. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take them, brown them in a little bit of oil, and then bake them in the oven. So they're browned on the outside, cooked slowly on the inside. The other tip that I learned from this recipe was why I always end up with meat squares instead of meatballs. 24 meatballs out of a pound of beef. I've never made that many meatballs until this recipe out of a pound of beef. So that is probably why I always end up with meat squares, was because they were just too big to roll around in that little bit of oil. Another reason that I'm sure that they get nice round meatballs is because of deep frying it, which I'm not going to do. But just lightly browning them small, baking them in the oven works great. We're heading on now to our chili recipe that we're going to be using ground turkey breast in, because we've already got one recipe this week with ground beef. It is fall, so of course we have to have a chili recipe. If you're going to be using ground turkey breast for this chili, a couple of the spices that we're going to include are going to be phenomenal. You can give or take them if you are using ground beef instead. So we've got 2 pounds of ground turkey breast, also a cup and a half of chicken broth. That specifically, this is a chicken bone broth that I made for 72 hours in my crock pot. A green bell pepper that's going to be chopped, a jalapeno chopped, a red bell pepper that's going to be chopped. Now here come the veggies. You don't want this to be a vegetable stew that you've added some meat to. You want it to be a chili. So pick one vegetable. In my case, I'm using a lot of celery. You could also use a few carrots or a winter squash like a butternut squash, or you could use a summer squash, yellow zucchini squash, to give some vegetable to the chili. It's going to help change the texture of the chili to be something different, but it's also going to allow you to have a vegetable on the side and focus more on the chili. Onion and garlic. We are coming into cold and flu season, so a couple of onions in this chopped, as well as garlic. The more garlic, the better as far as your immune system. A few cloves if you just want a taste of it. We like garlic, so we'll probably use the entire bulb chopped. Spices. Of course, you have to have cumin, a tablespoon of cumin, a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half if you like things a little hotter than we do, a teaspoon of cayenne, a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, and then here's one of my secret ingredients, especially when using ground turkey breast. A tablespoon and a half of cinnamon. Ground beef is not going to go as well as with the cinnamon. You're not going to taste it as much, but with the ground turkey breast you do. Herbs, these are from my garden. Marjoram, this is dried marjoram that I dried in the spring. Was supposed to have already put it away and stored it, but it's just been hanging there still drying. But marjoram, which you can use, marjoram has a mild enough flavor that even dried, I would use a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of that. Oregano that's fresh out of my garden this morning is a little more powerful than marjoram, of course. So with this, and especially fresh, I'm going to use about a tablespoon fresh, maybe a tablespoon and a half. If this was dried, where that flavor is more concentrated, maybe more like 2 teaspoons. This is all according to your taste. 3 cans of beans that have been drained and rinsed. Red beans are what I'm using. You could use black beans. You could use some red, some black. Tomato sauce, and then a large can of the diced tomatoes. Oil a little bit to brown the turkey in. Actually, first what you would do, brown your onion and your garlic, then brown your turkey, and then put all of the other vegetable type of ingredients in. Cook all that together for about 30 minutes, then start adding your liquid ingredients for about 30 minutes, and you're set to then serve that over rice or polenta, or have it by itself, have it over barley, however you want to have your chili. I am now going to start cooking up all of this and then come back in a bit to show you the end result. quick tip, when you have dried herbs on the branch, simply remove them into a container, put them into a mortar and pestle, and prep away without making a mess like I just did for your chili. Oh, this smells so good. The food is done. Chili. Ow, that is still hot coming off of the stove. The chili is finished. It is not quite enough fat in the chili for a powerful plate, so avocado is my fat of choice to add on the side with the chili, either on a side salad or any other type of vegetables to have with the chili. Couple of tips with that. Garlic, I mentioned earlier. I did go ahead and use the entire bulb of garlic. 7 cloves were in there, but that's fine. It tastes wonderful in here. A tip that I got from my brother-in-law, who is a former chef, is don't burn the garlic. I would often brown the garlic along with the onion and it would be a little bitter. He taught me that, oh, that's because you're browning it. The garlic should be sauteed but not browned. So finely minced garlic in here, but not burned or browned this time. Makes a big difference. The last tip, as I showed you both dried herbs and fresh herbs with this. The dried herbs I added when I added the bell pepper and the celery. The fresh herbs I didn't add. That fresh oregano went in at the end, about the last 10 minutes of cooking. The fresh herbs lose their potency, lose their flavor if they are cooked throughout. I don't know why, but that is the case. Meatballs. These mint meatballs are amazing. You can have them with hummus, with yogurt on the side, a Greek yogurt, tabbouleh, any other type of Mediterranean food goes wonderful with this. One of the tips to tell you on the meatballs is after I've browned it on 2 sides and I put it in the oven for baking, that was baked at 425 for 20 minutes and they came out perfect. Well, let me know what you think about these recipes. Try those mint meatballs. They are unique and so delicious. And the chili, of course, have all winter to keep that immune system built with the onion and the garlic. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to subscribe so that you can be the first to receive our new videos. And until next time, find your path and fulfill your potential.